The rain hammered against the windshield as Margaret Sullivan gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white against the worn leather. At 68E, she never imagined she'd be driving back to Fort Braxton, the military base that had shaped her life 4 decades ago. The wipers struggled against the downpour, much like her heart struggled against the memories threatening to surface. Beside her, Rex whined softly. The German Shepherd mix had been her constant companion for 3 years now, ever since she'd adopted him from the local shelter. Something about his intelligent brown eyes reminded her of the working dogs she'd trained during her service in the early 1980s. Today, those same eyes seemed restless, almost knowing. "Easy, boy," Margaret whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. "We're almost there." The invitation had arrived 2 weeks ago, crisp military letterhead announcing the 40th anniversary reunion of the 82nd Airborne Division's K9 unit. Margaret had thrown it in the trash twice before finally retrieving it, smoothing out the wrinkles with trembling fingers. She told herself she was going for closure, to finally put the ghosts to rest. But deep down, she knew she was returning for answers about that night in 1983 that had haunted her dreams for 4 decades. The base gates appeared through the rain like a portal to another time. The young guard, barely old enough to shave, checked her credentials with the same mechanical precision she remembered from her own days in uniform. As they drove through the familiar streets, Margaret's chest tightened. The buildings looked smaller somehow, weathered by time and countless deployments. Rex's behavior grew increasingly agitated as they approached the old K9 training facility. His ears perked up, and he began pawing at the window with an urgency that made Margaret's skin crawl. She'd never seen him act this way before. "What is it, Rex?" And she asked, pulling into the parking lot of what was now the Veterans Memorial Center. The building that once housed the dog kennels had been converted into a museum, its walls lined with photographs of fallen soldiers and their canine partners. As Margaret stepped out of the car, the rain immediately soaked through her jacket. Rex bolted from the vehicle the moment she opened his door, his leash slipping from her wet hands. He ran straight toward the memorial wall, stopping abruptly at a specific section and beginning to dig frantically at the base. "Rex, no!" Margaret called, hurrying after him. But as she approached, her blood turned to ice. The dog was digging directly beneath a photograph she recognized all too well, a black and white image of herself at 28, standing beside a German shepherd named Apollo, the same Apollo who had disappeared the night before her discharge, the night she'd tried to forget for 40 years. And the veterans began arriving for the reunion, their voices carrying across the parking lot as they recognized old friends. Margaret barely noticed them. Her attention was fixed on Rex, who had unearthed something metallic from the soft earth. With muddy paws, he nudged the object toward her, a tarnished dog tag that made her heart stop. The name etched into the metal was clear despite the years of burial: Apollo. Service number 4471. The same dog tag she'd watched disappear into the darkness on March 15th, 1983. "Margaret Sullivan, is that really you?" She spun around to find Colonel James Morrison approaching, his hair now silver, but his posture still military straight. He'd been her commanding officer during those final months of service, the man who'd signed her discharge papers with unusual haste after Apollo's disappearance. "Jim," she managed, quickly pocketing the dog tag. Rex pressed against her leg, still agitated but no longer digging. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Morrison said, his eyes darting nervously between Margaret and the spot where Rex had been digging. "After all these years, I thought you'd want to leave the past buried." The choice of words sent a chill down Margaret's spine. "Some things refuse to stay buried, apparently." Morrison's face paled slightly. Behind him, other veterans were gathering, their conversations growing louder as old bonds were renewed. But Margaret felt isolated in a bubble of tension with her former commander. "We should talk," Morrison said quietly. Privately. "There are things about your final mission that that weren't included in the official reports. Margaret's mouth went dry. The final mission. The one she'd been ordered never to discuss. The one that had ended with Apollo's disappearance and her immediate discharge. She'd spent 40 years believing the dog had simply run away, unable to handle the stress of military life. But Rex's behavior suggested something far more sinister. "Oh, what kind of things?" she asked. Morrison glanced around nervously. Not here. Too many ears. Meet me at the old ammunition depot at 1900 hours. Come alone." He paused, looking down at Rex. "And Margaret, leave the dog at your hotel." As Morrison walked away, Margaret felt the weight of Apollo's dog tag in her pocket like a burning coal. Rex whined softly, his intelligent eyes following the colonel's retreating figure with what could only be described as suspicion. The reunion festivities continued around them, but Margaret felt detached from the celebration. She moved through the crowd like a ghost, accepting handshakes and making small talk while her mind raced. Every laugh, every shared memory felt hollow against the growing certainty that her past was about to catch up with her in ways she'd never imagined. As the afternoon wore on, Margaret found herself studying the other veterans, wondering who else might know the truth about that night in 1983. She noticed how some of them avoided eye contact, how conversations died when she approached certain groups. The paranoia she'd thought she'd left behind in her military days began creeping back, settling over her like an old, unwelcome uniform. Rex remained glued to her side, his behavior still unusual. Several times, she caught him staring at specific individuals in the crowd, his body tense as if ready to spring into action. It was the same alertness she remembered from Apollo during their most dangerous missions. By evening, the rain had stopped, but dark clouds still hung low over the base. Margaret sat in her rental car outside the ammunition depot, Rex panting nervously in the passenger seat despite her earlier decision to leave him at the hotel. Something had compelled her to bring him, perhaps the same instinct that had kept her alive during her years of service. The depot was a concrete bunker built into a hillside, its entrance secured by a heavy metal door that stood slightly ajar. No lights were visible from inside, and Morrison's vehicle was nowhere to be seen. Margaret checked her watch. 7:15 p.m. She was 15 minutes late, having spent the extra time trying to calm her nerves and decide whether to trust her former commander. As she approached the entrance, Rex began to growl low in his throat. The sound raised every hair on Margaret's arms. She'd learned to trust animal instincts during her military service. They often detected danger long before human senses could. "Hello," she called into the darkness. "Jim, are you in there?" Silence answered her, broken only by the distant sound of wind through the trees. Margaret pulled out her phone's flashlight and stepped inside, Rex reluctantly following. The beam revealed a narrow corridor lined with empty ammunition racks, their metal frames casting eerie shadows on the concrete walls. Halfway down the corridor, Rex stopped abruptly and began digging again, this time at a section of floor where the concrete appeared newer than the surrounding area. Margaret's blood ran cold as she realized what she was looking at. A patch job, hastily done and poorly concealed after 4 decades of settling. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Some secrets are worth killing for. Stop digging or join your dog." Margaret's hands shook as she read the message. The reference to "your dog" could only mean Apollo. Someone knew she'd found the dog tag, knew she was getting close to the truth. But close to what truth? Rex's digging had exposed something white beneath the concrete, what looked like bone. Margaret's military training kicked in, overriding her fear with cold analysis. If Apollo was buried here, if he'd been killed rather than lost, then her final mission in 1983 had been about something far more serious than she'd ever imagined. The sound of footsteps echoed from the entrance. Margaret quickly turned off her phone's light and pressed herself against the wall, pulling Rex close. Multiple sets of boots were approaching, their measured pace suggesting military training. "As she's here," a voice whispered. "The car's outside. 40 years, and she couldn't leave well enough alone," another voice replied. Margaret recognized it as Morrison's, but the tone was colder than she'd ever heard from him. The dog's been digging. How much do you think she knows? Enough to be dangerous. We should have handled this differently from the beginning. Margaret's mind raced as the pieces began falling into place. Her final mission in 1983 hadn't been routine training. Apollo hadn't run away, and Morrison's invitation to the reunion hadn't been about honoring the past. It had been about silencing the one person who might remember what really happened. Rex pressed closer to her, his body trembling with barely contained energy. In the darkness, Margaret could feel his muscles coiled like springs, ready to protect her just as Apollo had tried to protect whatever secret had cost him his life. The footsteps were getting closer. Margaret had to make a choice: confront her past head-on or try to escape with the partial truth she'd already uncovered. But as she looked down at Rex, seeing Apollo's courage reflected in his eyes, she knew there was only one option. Some secrets were worth dying for, but some truths were worth living to expose. She reached into her pocket and gripped Apollo's dog tag, feeling its edges bite into her palm. Whatever happened next, she owed it to her old partner to finish what they'd started 40 years ago. The rain might have stopped, but the storm was just beginning. Margaret took a deep breath and stepped out of the shadows, Rex at her side, ready to face whatever truth lay buried in the concrete floor of the ammunition depot. The beam of her phone's flashlight cut through the darkness like a sword, illuminating not just the corridor ahead, but the path to justice that had been waiting 4 decades to be walked. Behind her, the footsteps stopped. The silence stretched like a held breath, pregnant with the weight of secrets about to be born into the light. Margaret Sullivan, veteran of wars both foreign and domestic, was about to fight the most important battle of her life, not for her country, but for the truth that had been buried with her faithful companion so many years ago. Hey, if this story has you on the edge of your seat wondering what really happened to Apollo and what Margaret will discover next, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss the shocking revelations coming up. Drop a comment below with your theories about what Margaret's final mission really involved. I love reading your thoughts, and they help the channel grow. And don't forget to smash that like button to help push this story to more people who love psychological thrillers. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more gripping content like this. The beam of Margaret's flashlight revealed 3 figures emerging from the shadows: Morrison and 2 men she didn't recognize, all wearing civilian clothes but moving with military precision. Their faces were grim, their hands resting near concealed weapons. "Margaret?" Morrison said, his voice carrying a mixture of regret and resolve. "I really hoped it wouldn't come to this." "What wouldn't come to this, Jim?" Margaret kept her voice steady, though her heart was pounding. "Finally telling me the truth about Apollo, about what really happened during Operation Silent Thunder." Morrison's eyes widened slightly at the mention of the operation name. Margaret had taken a calculated risk, hoping her memory of overheard conversations from 1983 would pay off. The reaction on his face confirmed she'd hit the mark. "You remember more than we thought," one of the other men said. He was younger than Morrison, probably in his 50s, with the kind of cold eyes Margaret had seen in intelligence operatives. I remember enough," Margaret bluffed. "I remember the late-night meetings. I remember the classified shipments. And I remember how Apollo started acting strange in the weeks before he disappeared." Rex growled low beside her, his attention fixed on the younger man. There was something familiar about the way the dog reacted, as if he recognized a scent or a threat that Margaret couldn't detect. "Apollo was a good dog," Morrison said, genuine sadness creeping into his voice. "Too good. He found something he wasn't supposed to find." "What kind of something?" The third man, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward. He was older than the others, with silver hair and scars that spoke of combat experience. The kind of something that could have ended careers and started congressional investigations. The kind of something that 3 decades of veterans' benefits and military contracts depended on keeping buried. Margaret felt the pieces clicking together like a weapon being assembled. That you were running illegal operations out of Fort Braxton, using the K-9 unit as cover. Not illegal, Morrison corrected. Unauthorized. There's a difference. We were protecting American interests in ways the politicians didn't have the stomach for, and Apollo found evidence of it. Apollo found a cache of documents that should have been destroyed. The younger man said, "Your dog had been trained too well. He detected the scent of explosives residue on papers that were supposed to be clean." Margaret's blood ran cold. "You were running arms. We were ensuring that American weapons technology didn't fall into the wrong hands," the scarred man replied. Sometimes that meant intercepting shipments before they reached their intended destinations. Sometimes it meant redirecting them to more appropriate recipients. You were stealing weapons and selling them to the highest bidder. We were patriots doing what needed to be done, while bureaucrats in Washington played politics with national security. Rex's growling intensified, and Margaret realized why the dog seemed so agitated. The scent markers, the behavioral patterns. Rex wasn't just any shelter dog. He was a trained military animal, possibly one who had been exposed to similar operations. "Where did Rex come from?" Idushi asked suddenly. The three men exchanged glances. Morrison sighed heavily. "Fort Benning. He was retired from service 3 years ago, after his handler was killed in Afghanistan. The same handler who had been asking too many questions about old K-9 unit records." Margaret's world tilted. "But you've been watching me. You knew I'd adopt him, as we knew you had a weakness for military dogs. We thought having Rex around might help you remember why some secrets are better left buried. We didn't expect him to start digging up the past, literally." The younger man pulled out a tablet and showed Margaret a series of photographs, surveillance images of her daily routine, her visits to the dog park, her grocery shopping trips. They'd been monitoring her for years, waiting to see if she'd ever become a threat to their operation. "The arms dealing never stopped, did it?" Margaret asked. "But it evolved," the scarred man admitted. "When private military contractors, overseas security firms, rebel groups fighting for democracy. The Cold War ended, but the need for American weapons in the right hands never did. And the wrong hands. Sometimes the line between right and wrong gets blurred when you're trying to prevent another 9/11. Margaret looked down at Rex, who was now trembling with barely contained aggression. The dog's training was surfacing, responding to the threat these men represented. But there was something else in his behavior, something that reminded her powerfully of Apollo's final days. "Apollo tried to warn me, didn't he? That's why he was acting strange." Morrison nodded reluctantly. "Dogs can sense danger better than humans. Apollo knew something was wrong with the operation. He started refusing commands, trying to lead you away from certain areas of the base. We realized he was going to expose everything, so you killed him. We had no choice. Apollo had been trained to detect explosives and chemical signatures. He could have led investigators straight to our storage facilities. One dog's life versus the security of an entire operation that was protecting American interests worldwide." Margaret felt tears burning her eyes, but her voice remained steady. "And you would have killed me too, if I'd gotten too close to the truth. We hoped your discharge and the passage of time would be enough. Most people want to forget their military service, not dig deeper into it." Rex suddenly lunged forward, not attacking, but positioning himself between Margaret and the three men. His body language was pure protection, the same stance Apollo had taken during their most dangerous missions. "But Rex changed everything," Margaret said, understanding flooding through her. "He's been trained to detect the same chemical signatures as Apollo. That's why he started digging at the memorial wall. That's why he found the dog tag. Chemical residue can linger for decades in the right conditions," the younger man confirmed. We thought we'd cleaned everything up, but apparently not well enough." Margaret reached into her pocket and pulled out Apollo's dog tag, holding it up so the light caught its surface. "This isn't just a memorial anymore. It's evidence." "Evidence of what?" Morrison asked. A dear 40-year-old operation that officially never existed. Documents that were destroyed decades ago. The word of a retired veteran against 3 decorated officers. The evidence that you murdered a military working dog to cover up your crimes. Evidence that you've been running illegal arms operations for 4 decades. Evidence that you killed Rex's handler when he got too close to the truth. The scarred man stepped closer, his hand moving toward his jacket. Evidence that will never see the light of day. But Rex was faster. The dog launched himself at the man's arm, his teeth finding purchase in the fabric of the jacket. The man cursed and tried to shake him off, but Rex held on with the tenacity of his training. Margaret used the distraction to back toward the entrance, her phone already dialing 911. But Morrison was quicker than his age suggested, blocking her path with surprising agility. I'm sorry, Margaret. I really am. But this is bigger than one person's need for closure. This is about justice for Apollo, and for Rex's handler, and for every person who's been hurt by your illegal operations. Justice. Morrison laughed bitterly. Do you know how many American lives our operations have saved? How many terrorist attacks we've prevented by ensuring the right people had the right weapons at the right time? Ooh, and how many innocent people have died because you put profits over principles? The question hung in the air like smoke from a battlefield. Margaret could see the doubt creeping into Morrison's eyes, the weight of 4 decades of justification finally beginning to crack under the pressure of truth. Rex had released the scarred man's arm and was now standing guard, his body coiled and ready to spring again. The younger man was reaching for his own weapon when the sound of sirens began echoing across the base. Margaret smiled grimly. I called for backup before I came in. Old habits die hard. Morrison's face went pale. As you couldn't have known, I didn't know. But Apollo trained me well. Never go into a dangerous situation without an exit strategy. The sirens were getting closer, and Margaret could see the panic beginning to set in among the 3 men. 40 years of secrets were about to come crashing down around them, and there was nowhere left to run. It's over, Jim, Margaret said quietly. The Apollo can finally rest in peace. As the first police cars pulled up outside the depot, their red and blue lights painting the concrete walls in patriotic colors. Margaret knelt down and scratched Rex behind the ears. The dog leaned into her touch, his mission finally complete. Good boy, she whispered. You found him. You found the truth. The arrest of 3 former military officers on charges ranging from arms trafficking to murder sent shockwaves through the veteran community and beyond. Margaret's testimony, combined with the evidence Rex had literally unearthed, opened investigations that would span multiple decades and continents. But for Margaret, the most important moment came 3 weeks later when she stood once again at the memorial wall at Fort Braxton. This time she wasn't alone. Rex sat beside her, calm and content, while a small crowd of veterans and their families gathered for a special ceremony. A new plaque had been installed next to Apollo's photograph, honoring not just the dog's service, but his ultimate sacrifice in the pursuit of truth. The inscription read, Apollo, military working dog, died in service to justice. His legacy lives on. Margaret placed a fresh bouquet of flowers at the base of the memorial, then pulled Apollo's dog tag from her pocket. She'd been offered the chance to keep it, but she knew where it belonged. Carefully, she placed the tarnished metal tag next to the flowers. Thank you, old friend, she whispered, for never giving up, for leading me to the truth, for sending Rex to finish what we started. As if understanding the significance of the moment, Rex placed his paw on the memorial wall just below Apollo's photograph. The gesture was so human, so full of respect and recognition, that several people in the crowd wiped away tears. Margaret had found her closure, but more importantly, she'd found her purpose. The investigation had revealed a network of corruption that stretched far beyond Fort Braxton, and her testimony would be crucial in bringing justice to victims around the world. She'd also found a new partner. Rex would be staying with her permanently. His military service officially ended, but his real work just beginning. Together, They would help investigators track down other buried secrets, other forgotten crimes that needed to see the light of day. As they walked away from the memorial, Margaret felt a weight lifting from her shoulders that she'd carried for 40 years. The ghosts of her past had finally been laid to rest, not through forgetting, but through remembering, through refusing to let injustice remain buried. Rex trotted beside her, his tail wagging for the first time since she'd known him. He'd completed his mission, honored his predecessor's sacrifice, and found a new home with someone who understood the true meaning of loyalty and service. The rain had stopped, the clouds had cleared, and for the first time in decades, Margaret Sullivan could see the sun breaking through. If this incredible true story of courage, loyalty, and the pursuit of justice has moved you, I need your help to share it with the world. Please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss stories like this that honor our veterans and their four-legged heroes. Leave a comment below, sharing your own experiences with military working dogs, or let me know what other untold military stories you'd like to hear. Your engagement helps this channel grow and ensures that these important stories of sacrifice and honor reach the people who need to hear them. Don't forget to hit that like button. It really does make a difference in helping YouTube share this content with others who appreciate stories of real American heroes. Thank you for watching, and remember, some truths are worth fighting for, no matter how long it takes to uncover them. The months following the arrests brought a media storm that Margaret had never anticipated. News crews camped outside her modest ranch house in rural Virginia, reporters shouting questions about government cover-ups and military corruption. She'd become the reluctant face of a scandal that reached into the highest levels of the Pentagon. Rex proved invaluable during this period, his protective instincts keeping overzealous journalists at bay, while his calming presence helped Margaret navigate the stress of congressional hearings and FBI interviews. The dog seemed to understand that their fight was far from over. It was during one of these interviews, 6 months after the Fort Braxton arrests, that Margaret first learned about the Blackwater connection. FBI Special Agent Sarah Chen spread photographs across the conference table, each one showing familiar faces in unfamiliar contexts. "We've traced the arms trafficking network back to 1979, Chen explained. Morrison's operation was just one cell in a much larger organization. They've been using retired military personnel and private contractors to move weapons across 6 continents. Margaret studied the photographs, her blood running cold as she recognized several faces from her military days. How many people are we talking about? Conservative estimate? Over 200 active participants, with thousands more who may have unknowingly facilitated operations. The financial trail alone involves 17 countries and approximately $4 billion in illegal arms sales. The scope was staggering. What Margaret had thought was a localized corruption case had revealed itself as an international conspiracy spanning decades. She felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what Apollo's discovery had set in motion. "But there's something else," Chen continued, pulling out a thick file. "We've identified 12 other military working dogs that disappeared under suspicious circumstances between 1978 and 1995. All of them were assigned to units, that later showed connections to the trafficking network." Margaret's hands trembled as she opened the file. Photographs of German Shepherds, Belgian Malinois, and Labrador Retrievers stared back at her, each with their service records and the notation, "Missing, presumed lost." But Margaret now knew better. These weren't lost dogs, they were murdered witnesses. Rex wasn't randomly placed in that shelter, was he? Margaret asked. Chen shook her head. Rex was originally assigned to a unit investigating suspicious activities at Fort Benning. His handler, Sergeant Maria Santos, had been tracking financial irregularities in weapons procurement. 3 days before she was scheduled to testify to a military tribunal, she died in what was ruled a training accident. But Rex survived. Rex was found 3 days later, wandering the base perimeter, He was traumatized, wouldn't respond to commands from anyone except Santos's replacement. The replacement officer recommended immediate retirement and civilian adoption. Margaret looked down at Rex, who was lying quietly beside her chair. The dog's eyes held a depth of understanding that went beyond normal canine intelligence. He'd witnessed his handler's murder and somehow survived to continue the mission. They've been using the adoption system to monitor potential threats, Chen continued. Veterans with K9 experience who might ask uncomfortable questions were subtly directed toward specific dogs, animals who had been exposed to the operations and might react to certain stimuli. Like chemical residue from weapons storage. Exactly. They thought they were being clever, using the dogs as early warning systems. If a veteran got too close to the truth, their adopted dog's behavior would alert the network. Margaret felt sick. But it backfired with Rex. Rex was different. His training was more advanced, his loyalty stronger. Instead of alerting them to your investigation, he helped you uncover the truth. The revelation that she'd been manipulated for 3 years was almost too much to bear. Every walk in the park, every trip to the veterinarian, every moment of companionship with Rex had been shadowed by surveillance and deception. But as she looked at the dog, she realized something important. Whatever the network's intentions had been, Rex had made his own choice. He'd chosen loyalty to the truth over loyalty to his handlers. He'd chosen to honor Apollo's memory and Santos's sacrifice. Siku, what happens now? Margaret asked. Now we need your help to identify other potential victims. Veterans who adopted military dogs in the past 20 years and might have unknowingly become part of the surveillance network. Chen pulled out a map of the United States, marked with red dots representing known adoption placements. The pattern was clear. Concentrations around major military bases with particular density in areas where the trafficking network had been most active. We estimate there are over 300 veterans who may have been monitored through their adopted dogs. Most of them have no idea they're connected to any of this. Margaret studied the map, her military mind automatically analyzing the strategic placement of the dots. You want me to contact them? We want you to help us approach them. A fellow veteran reaching out about their dog's behavior will seem natural, non-threatening. If we send federal agents knocking on doors, people will panic. The weight of responsibility settled on Margaret's shoulders like a familiar pack. She'd thought her military service was over, but apparently her most important mission was just beginning. Over the following weeks, Margaret and Rex traveled across the country, visiting veterans in small towns and big cities, on farms and in suburbs. Each conversation followed a similar pattern: casual questions about their dog's behavior, gentle probing about unusual reactions to certain locations or people. The stories that emerged painted a picture of systematic manipulation that was both brilliant and horrifying. Dogs trained to detect explosives, reacting to storage facilities that officially didn't exist. Animals becoming agitated around specific individuals who later proved to have connections to the trafficking network. Pets displaying protective behaviors that their owners had attributed to normal canine instincts, but which actually represented sophisticated threat assessment. In Oklahoma, they met Tom Bradley, a Gulf War veteran whose adopted Malinois had been leading him away from certain areas of his town for 2 years. Those areas, it turned out, contained warehouses used by shell companies connected to the trafficking network. In Montana, Sarah Kim's German Shepherd had been refusing to let her visit a particular veterans support group. Investigation revealed that the group's coordinator was funneling information about potentially troublesome veterans to network operatives. Each revelation added another piece to the puzzle, but it also added another layer of paranoia to Margaret's daily life. How many people in her own community might be connected to the network? How many casual encounters over the years had actually been surveillance operations? Rex seemed to sense her growing anxiety. The dog's protective behaviors intensified, and he began showing signs of hypervigilance that reminded Margaret of combat stress reactions in human soldiers. The weight of carrying so many secrets was taking its toll on both of them. It was during a visit to a veteran in Arizona that Margaret first realized they were being followed. Rex had been acting increasingly agitated during their cross-country travels, but she'd attributed it to the stress of constant movement and new environments. Now, watching the dog's reaction to a seemingly innocent sedan that had appeared behind them on 3 separate occasions, she understood the truth. The network knew what they were doing and was tracking their progress. Margaret's military training kicked in immediately. She began varying their routes, using counter-surveillance techniques she hadn't employed since her active duty days. But whoever was following them was professional, maintaining distance and changing vehicles regularly. The cat-and-mouse game continued for weeks, adding a layer of tension to their already stressful mission. Margaret found herself checking mirrors constantly, analyzing every person they encountered for signs of deception or threat. Rex's behavior became increasingly protective, positioning himself between Margaret and strangers, growling at people who approached too quickly or too closely. The breaking point came in Nevada, outside Las Vegas. Margaret had arranged to meet with a veteran named David Chen, no relation to the FBI agent, whose adopted pit bull mix had been displaying unusual behavior around certain casinos in the city. The meeting was scheduled for a quiet diner on the outskirts of town. Away from the crowds and surveillance cameras of the Strip, Margaret arrived early, choosing a booth with clear sightlines to all entrances. Rex settled beside her, alert but calm. David arrived precisely on time, a nervous-looking man in his 50s with the careful movements of someone dealing with chronic pain. The conversation started normally, with David describing his dog's reactions to specific locations around the city. But as he talked, Margaret noticed Rex's behavior changing. The dog's ears were flattened, his body tense, and he was staring fixedly at something behind David's shoulder. Margaret glanced in that direction and felt her blood turn to ice. 3 men had entered the diner, spreading out to cover different exits. They moved with the casual precision of professionals. But Margaret's trained eye caught the telltale signs, the way they scanned the room, the positioning of their hands near concealed weapons, the coordinated timing of their movements. "David," she said quietly, "I need you to listen carefully and do exactly what I say." But David's expression had already changed. The nervousness was gone, replaced by something cold and calculating. "I'm sorry, Margaret. I really am. But some operations are too important to let one person's conscience destroy them." Margaret's heart sank as she realized the truth. David wasn't a victim of the surveillance network. He was part of it. The meeting had been a trap, designed to isolate her in a location where she could be eliminated without witnesses. Rex was already moving, his body coiled and ready to spring. The dog's training was taking over, responding to the immediate threat with the same intensity that had saved Margaret's life in the ammunition depot months earlier. "Call him off, Margaret," David said, his hand moving toward his jacket. "Make this easy on everyone." "The only thing that would be easy," Margaret replied, "would be letting you get away with 40 years of murder and corruption. But that's not going to happen." She gave Rex a subtle hand signal, one she'd learned from Apollo decades earlier. The dog exploded into motion, launching himself across the table at David while Margaret dove toward the nearest exit. Chaos erupted in the small diner. Customers screamed and scattered as Rex and David crashed to the floor, the dog's teeth finding purchase in the man's gun arm. The 3 other operatives drew their weapons, but the panicking civilians made clean shots impossible. Margaret made it to the kitchen, her military training guiding her through the maze of equipment and supplies. She could hear Rex snarling and David screaming, the sounds of a life-and-death struggle playing out in the dining room. The back exit was blocked by another operative, this one younger and faster than the others. Margaret grabbed a heavy skillet from the prep station and swung it with all her strength, connecting with the man's temple and dropping him to the floor. She burst through the back door into the Nevada desert heat, Rex appearing beside her moments later. The dog's muzzle was bloody, but he was moving normally. Behind them, she could hear shouting and the sound of vehicles starting. They ran toward Margaret's rental car, parked a block away as a precaution. Rex leapt into the passenger seat as Margaret gunned the engine, tires squealing as they accelerated away from the diner. In the rearview mirror, she could see two SUVs pulling out in pursuit. The network had finally decided that surveillance wasn't enough. They were moving to eliminate the threat permanently. Margaret's phone rang as she navigated the desert highway at dangerous speeds. FBI agent Chen's voice was tense with urgency. "Margaret, where are you?" "We've lost contact with our surveillance team." "Your surveillance team?" Margaret nearly lost control of the car. "Oh, you've been watching me." For your protection. The network has been making moves, consolidating resources. We thought they might try something. They just did. David Chen was one of them. The meeting was a setup. A long pause. David Chen is my brother." The revelation hit Margaret like a physical blow. The FBI agent she'd been working with for months, sharing sensitive information and strategic plans, was related to a network operative. The implications were staggering. "Sarah, I need to know right now. Are you part of this?" "Dunno." Chen's voice was firm but strained. But I think they've been using me to track your progress. My brother and I haven't spoken in years, but if he's involved..." Her voice trailed off as the full scope of the betrayal became clear. Margaret could see the SUVs gaining ground in her mirror. Rex was panting heavily, his adrenaline still running high from the confrontation in the diner. They needed help, but Margaret was no longer sure who she could trust. "Sarah, I need extraction now, and I need to know that you're not leading me into another trap. There's a safe house 40 miles north of your position. GPS coordinates coming to your phone now. Margaret, I swear to you on my badge and my honor, I had no idea about David's involvement." Margaret had to make a choice. Trust the FBI agent whose brother had just tried to kill her, or try to outrun professional killers in the Nevada desert with no backup and limited resources. Rex made the decision for her, placing his paw on her arm and looking directly into her eyes. The dog's expression was calm, trusting. If Rex believed they should trust Chen, that was good enough for Margaret. She took the next exit, following the GPS coordinates toward what she hoped would be safety rather than another trap. Behind them, the SUVs followed, maintaining their distance but never falling back far enough to lose visual contact. The safe house turned out to be a fortified compound hidden in the desert hills, surrounded by high walls and electronic surveillance equipment. As Margaret's car approached the gate, she could see armed figures moving on the perimeter, but whether they were FBI agents or network operatives remained to be seen. The gate opened automatically, and Margaret drove through, her heart pounding as it closed behind them. Rex was alert but not agitated, which she took as a positive sign. The dog's threat assessment abilities had proven remarkably accurate throughout their ordeal. Agent Chen was waiting in the compound's main building, her face drawn with exhaustion and stress. She was flanked by two other agents Margaret didn't recognize, their body language professional but tense. Thank God you made it," Chen said as Margaret and Rex entered the building. "Jack, we've been monitoring network communications. They've issued a kill order on both of you." Margaret felt a chill despite the desert heat. "How long do we have?" "But they're regrouping after the failed operation in Vegas. Maybe 12 hours before they mount another attempt." 12 hours to do what? Chen spread a series of documents across a conference table. 12 hours to end this permanently. We've identified the network's command structure, their financial systems, their communication protocols, everything we need to bring down the entire organization. Margaret studied the documents, her military mind analyzing the intelligence like a battle plan. The scope was even larger than she'd imagined. The network had tentacles reaching into defense contractors, private military companies, and government agencies across multiple countries. "This is going to require more than just arrests," she said. "And this is going to require a coordinated international operation, which is already in motion. Interpol, military intelligence services from allied nations, financial crimes units from 6 countries. Everyone's been waiting for the final piece of evidence to move simultaneously. What final piece? Duchenne pulled out a tablet showing a map of Nevada. The network's central server farm. It's located in a facility about 60 miles from here, disguised as a data center for a tech company. Every transaction, every communication, every piece of evidence we need is stored there. Margaret felt her stomach drop. And you want Rex and me to help you get it? You're the only ones who can. The facility is guarded by dogs, military working dogs that have been trained to attack intruders. But they won't attack Rex. He carries the scent markers of the network's training programs. He can get close enough to disable their security systems. Margaret looked down at Rex, who was sitting calmly beside her chair. The dog's intelligent eyes seemed to understand the weight of what was being asked of him. One final mission, one last chance to honor Apollo's sacrifice and bring justice to all the murdered handlers and disappeared dogs. Have you bites? What's the timeline? Here we move at dawn. 6 hours to plan, 6 hours to execute. By tomorrow night, either the network is finished or we're all dead. Margaret nodded grimly. After 40 years of running from the truth, it was time to face it head-on. She reached down and scratched Rex behind the ears, feeling the dog lean into her touch with complete trust. "Okay, boy," she whispered. "One more mission. Let's finish what Apollo started." As the sun set over the Nevada desert, Margaret Sullivan prepared for what might be her final battle. But this time, she wasn't fighting for her country or her commanding officers. She was fighting for justice, for truth, and for the memory of a faithful dog who had died protecting secrets that needed to see the light of day. The war was almost over. Tomorrow would determine whether the good guys finally won. The dawn raid was swift and decisive. Rex led the team through the facility's defenses, his presence calming the guard dogs as planned. Within hours, terabytes of evidence were secured, revealing the full scope of the international conspiracy. By sunset, coordinated arrests across 6 countries had dismantled the network completely. Morrison and his associates received life sentences. The families of murdered handlers finally had justice. Margaret stood once more at Apollo's memorial, this time with Rex and dozens of other veterans whose dogs had been victims of the conspiracy. A new plaque honored all the fallen K9 heroes who had died protecting the truth. "Mission accomplished, old friend," Margaret whispered, placing fresh flowers beside Apollo's photo. Rex wagged his tail, finally at peace. The ghosts of the past had been laid to rest, and justice had prevailed. Margaret smiled, knowing that sometimes the best battles are fought not with weapons, but with courage, loyalty, and an unshakable commitment to doing what's right. The truth had set them all free. That's a wrap on this incredible journey of justice and loyalty. If this story moved you, and you want to see more content honoring our military heroes and their 4-legged partners, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell icon for notifications. Drop a comment sharing your thoughts about Margaret and Rex's courage. Your engagement helps this channel reach more people who need to hear these powerful stories. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and share it with fellow veterans and dog lovers. Your support means everything and helps me continue bringing you these inspiring tales of honor, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bond between humans and their faithful companions. Thank you for watching, and remember, the truth is always worth fighting for.